Whoa, 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 whoa. What's going on, people? We are Tottenham TV back here for another preview stream. Southampton away in the Premier League, Saturday, 3 o'clock kickoff. Not a happy hunting ground for us, St Mary's, usually. Only one win in our last 6 there, but it's a bit different this year. Southampton are rooted right to the bottom of the league. And what do you make out of Southampton? Obviously, it's like a very tight league, so maybe bottom of the league isn't what it usually is, bottom of the league. But what do you make out of them so far this season?
They've been pretty dreadful, to be honest. They've got a really young team, and they've had this policy for many years of they buy players very cheap, they build them up, and then they usually sell them on for quite hefty fees. And they've done this policy many times. They've had much success with it, but it was always going to catch up with them at some point. And I feel like at this point, they're now at the stage where they've sold all their established players, people like Højbjerg and people like that. And they're now,
apart from Ward-Prowse, pretty much.
They're now in the cycle where they've got all these young players who are not experienced. They've only got Ward-Prowse and maybe you could argue Walker-Peters as kind of senior players, and they've got no established players to kind of keep up the levels. With young players, their form is going to be very up and down, and they do have some talented young players. Don't get me wrong, Lavia, brilliantly talented 18-year-old. Sulemana's got bags of ability. Obviously, we know Ward-Prowse he's one of their established players. I think Bella Kotchap, I think he's a really talented centre-back. But when you married that with people like Bednarek, Walcott, these aren't players who are going to elevate the younger players. So their senior players aren't good enough, and the younger players are too young to kind of make the impact. And it's left them in a situation where, despite a lot of talent, they can't really get consistent results and consistent performances. And they've let go of a manager who I think was doing an underrated job in Ralph Hasenhüttl. I thought he did really well to keep them up pretty much year on year. And although they weren't really improving and progressing into like a mid-table team, he was every year keeping them in the Premier League. I can't remember too many times where they were going into the last day and having to win to stay up. They were usually safe by a few games to go. So I thought he was doing quite a good job. I think it was underrated. They got rid of him. They brought in Nathan Jones. He was an absolute disaster. He was gone after like 10 games, if not shorter. He was gone very quickly. And now they're in a situation where they've gone for one of the coaches because they couldn't even find a manager to replace Nathan Jones. So I reckon they're massively regretting letting go of Hasenhüttl when they did. And now they're in a situation where they're going to have to somehow galvanise this young team to dig themselves out of a massive hole they're in. Otherwise, they're going down. To be fair to them, they're only 2 points clear of the 7 teams. So it's still very open. If they can somehow string a run of results together, they do have every chance. But I think with this crop of young players, despite the fact I do believe in a lot of them, I think a lot of the young players are going to go on to have big futures and become good Premier League players. I just think right now it's come at the wrong time. And I think that they're kind of looking for these young players to overperform, whereas these young players need time. And unfortunately, they don't have time.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And it's kind of like, I feel like with Southampton, they took a step in the summer to really like refresh the squad with younger talent, like you're saying. And it might have come at the wrong time with such a tight battle for the drop down at the bottom. So we have to see how it plays out for them. But when you're looking at the form of the two teams, I mean, Southampton were usually quite a solid home outfit, but have lost 4 out of their last 5 games at home. One of those losses, well, just before the 5 losses, actually, 4 losses, was a loss to Nottingham Forest at home. And like Nottingham Forest have been terrible away from home this season. So that result is quite telling. But they beat Man City at home, which was that in the cup. So, yeah. I mean, like they have had some results at home this season, but right now they are really on a hiding next to nothing. Just recently, they lost to Grimsby at home in the cup as well, didn't they? But I think that when you're looking at Southampton, this is a game that we should be going to take 3 points, stamping our authority. But the way Southampton play, Do you reckon that's maybe going to play into our hands, or will it work against us? They like to try and dominate the possession in some way.
They're really struggling with an identity, I have to say right now, Southampton. It's hard to put your finger on how they play, because one under Hasenhüttl was one way, under Nathan Jones it was another way, and now under this guy Sellers, he's also playing a different kind of way as well. They do usually Southampton like to, put a lot of energy into their performances, press really high. But recently, they've become more of a counter-attacking team. I saw them when they beat Leicester. They beat Leicester at home not so long ago, and I was watching that game, and they were very much sitting deep, kind of countering on Leicester, exploiting the space Leicester left behind them. So I'm thinking that I think if they're going to stay in this league, that's probably the best way. Their best avenue to try and get results. Because I think if they dominate, they're not good enough to dominate games and then also not be exposed at the back right now. They're just not good enough. So they're going to have to be compact, make it difficult for the opposition, and then exploit them on the counter. That's what they tried to do against Man United. And I know Man United went down to 10 men, but before that, they had a few moments on the counter, even with 10 men. Obviously, Southampton had more of the ball, but they were still trying to, a lot of the time, play on the counter-attack. I saw against Chelsea, I was watching their game against Chelsea when they beat them at Stamford Bridge very recently. And that was very much, again, they were counter-attacking Chelsea. Chelsea had a lot of possession, and Southampton would spring on them with their young, bright attackers and midfield players and try and exploit the space. And to be fair, in that first half, Southampton had a lot of control of that game, and they were 1-0 up, Ward-Prowse with a free kick, and Chelsea dominated the second half but couldn't overcome it. So I do feel like with Southampton obviously fighting tooth and nail right now, Spurs' mentality has been in question. These are the kind of games we could easily slip up with the energy they have, and that fight which we have to match. If we don't match that fight that they're going to bring, then they could easily get a result. That's the big question mark for me. Is with the season now all relies on this top four. We have to put everything into it if we're going to get results in games like on the weekend, because these teams are fighting tooth and nail for every single point they can get in this relegation battle, and Spurs have to be up for the fight. And that's one of the question marks I have about the Spurs team, whether they are up for the fight.
Yeah, it's a big question mark. But, you say, against Leicester, they had a good counter-attacking display, won the game 1-0. Fast forward to the midweek game against Brentford. I mean, they really looked to dominate the possession there. They had, I think, over 65% possession in that game, just couldn't find a way through. And I think that if Ward-Prowse isn't scoring a free kick or isn't delivering from a set piece from them, I mean, they don't really have that many avenues to attack, do they? Yeah,
because Shea Adams is not a clinical finisher. He's a very good link-up striker, but he's not the most clinical finishers. You've got Sulemana on the one side, who's again a really good dribbler, but very frustrating in the final third. Theo Walcott, who's just his levels are completely dropped. I think he's been terrible for many years. Although on his day he used to be a very good finisher, but those days are long gone. So you're very much relying on Ward-Prowse from set pieces or shots in and around the penalty area to find those moments of magic. That's usually when that's usually how they found their joy. Although they do have a player called Alcaraz, who I've been a bit impressed with. I do like the look of him. He's a new player they brought in January, another young player. But again, he's not a clinical finisher. He's more of a creative player, I feel, and. He's one who looks bright, but again, he's not one who you can rely on. They've got other young strikers like Mara. He's one who's struggled to adapt to the Premier League, and he hasn't quite found his shooting boots. So it's one of the reasons why, despite Southampton against the likes of Brentford, they had a lot of possession, but they weren't able to find those moments of quality because their strike force, their front four players are just full of players who are not consistent finishers or too young or past their best. So that's a big reason why they haven't been able to find goals easy to come by this season.
Yeah, they signed a player. I'm not sure if it was in January or the summer. I think it was January. It was Porro from Genk in Belgium, and he scored crazy amounts of goals in Belgium. I'm looking at it now. He scored 16 in 19 first half of the season, 21 in 35 last season, 33 in 38 the season before. And I was really intrigued to see how he would match up in the Premier League, but he hasn't seemed to be getting too much of a look in.
But they signed someone, Orsic, as well in January, hasn't he? He's played 6 minutes.
Yeah.
since coming in. He's one who's a clinical finisher, but
it baffles me that these two aren't getting enough minutes,
especially
when
when
they're
you
struggling in front of goal.
Yeah, that's what you'd think. I think Orsic is definitely a player who's got good quality, and he's got a really good finish. If he's one in front of goal, you can rely on him to pull off that finish. But maybe it's just physically he's struggling to deal with the demands of the Premier League. I mean, you don't have as little as 6 minutes as a new signing for no reason. There's got to be something seriously wrong there.
He's looked good every time I've seen him play for Zagreb or Croatia.
Yeah, well, Croatia in the World Cup, he looked when he got minutes, he looked good. For Zagreb, whenever he comes up against an English team, he seems to score. He scored against a hat-trick against Spurs. He scored against Chelsea in the Champions League, and he scored against West Ham in the Europa League as well. So he has history against English teams, so he shows he can play against them. But for one reason or another, Southampton, they just haven't fancied him at all. 6 minutes since January, since signing. That's like really alarm bells.
Yeah, absolutely. If you bring up the head-to-head between the two clubs, I mean, we have a fairly good record against Southampton at home specifically. When you're looking at the away form, 1 win in our last 6 visits to St Mary's. I mean, why has it been such a unhappy hunting ground for us? I mean, that 1 win was that 5-2 when Heung-min Son scored 4 goals. Him and Kane, I think, provided, what was it, four assists and a goal that day, was it, for Harry Kane? And I thought that was an unbelievable performance. But apart from that, last year we didn't we lose 3-2 last year there?
At home we lost 3-2.
At home we drew 1-1 last year, 1-1 the year, 5-2 the year before, 1-1 the year before, 1-0 loss, 2-1 loss, 1-1, and then 2016 we won 4-1. I mean, what is it about St Mary's and Spurs?
I don't know. I don't think there's a specific reason. I just think sometimes you come into these games expecting a win, and I think we come into this game underestimating Southampton more often than not. And they're usually at home with the crowd behind them, and quite a tough nut to crack if you're not on it, if you're not up for the fight. Again, this is something that this Spurs team have been guilty of too many times, just to underestimate the opposition. I think a lot of the time that's what happens when we go to Southampton. We think it's going to be an easier game than it is, and we turn up and it's a lot harder to get the result. Last season specifically, we were 1-0. We came into the game in quite decent form. We were 1-0 down within 20 minutes. And then Salisu gets sent off just before half time. We get a penalty, and we equalise just before half time, and we had the whole of the second half to grab a goal, and we couldn't do it. Yeah. Against 10 men.
I remember that was tragic.
That was a really frustrating game, one of the most frustrating games of last season. 10 men for 45 minutes, we couldn't get a goal. That was really disappointing. So we've got to have that in mind going into this game. But look, they're a different team, even from last season, a lot younger. Different kind of threat, different experience. But you've got to be wary of these teams because they're in bad form and because they're in a relegation battle and they have a new manager. You've got to be wary that every game he's going to be trying something new until he finds something that clicks. And you just never know. It could easily be this game where he finally finds that formula for that starts to click, because obviously he's going to keep chopping and changing until he finds that right formula for his team, because he's still working it out, and then that until he finds something that can find him a bit of consistency in this relegation battle. And you never know, in this kind of game it could easily we can easily start in this game, he can pull off a tactical surprise and he can find that something that could work for him. So you've always got to be really wary in these kind of games, that sometimes you don't know what to expect. You just got to concentrate on your game and make sure that you're on point and you're up for the fight and you're ready for the battle, because we have better players, we have the better team, but it's just whether we're ready for a battle, and that's what we need to be ready for. Because they're going to scrape and scratch for everything. Yeah,
absolutely. Right, rooted to the bottom of the league, like I said. But in terms of the two players that we've looked at for ones to watch, I mean, we already mentioned Ward-Prowse. He always seems to get a goal against us, doesn't he? And definitely from set pieces, you definitely have to be wary about. With Romero about, I'm sure they're going to get quite a few set pieces tomorrow.
Although Forster will know about his set pieces, won't he?
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. Forster coming up against his old club. And actually, when I'm looking at their keeper, Bazunu, is he someone that we should be looking at?
To replace Lloris? No, I mean, not yet. I like him, but I like him for his age. I think right now he's a bottom half Premier League goalkeeper.
You reckon? Yeah.
Yeah, right now. I'm not saying in the future he won't grow into being a top half or even a top 6 goalkeeper. But right now he's definitely a bottom half goalkeeper. He's
David
not.
Harris ain't watching you.
I don't think he's good enough right now to be our number 1. I just don't. I don't. I'm not saying he's got a terrible future. He's very young. He's like 22 or something. He's really young.
Yeah,
so,
he is young.
So like, it's no slight on him to be that level. I think you're expected to be that level at his age. He's easy. That's even impressive to be a bottom half keeper at his age, to be fair. But I don't think unless we're signing him to be our number 2, I wouldn't sign Bazunu to be our number 1 right now, in my opinion.
And Che Adams, I mean, very hot and cold player, isn't he? But a very streaky player. I mean, it seems like when he scores one, he can score like a few in a row. But when he's cold, he's really cold, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, he's one of those where he can, on his day, he can, like, against really big teams, he can actually look, like, really on it and give them a lot of trouble. I think, actually, he plays a lot better when he has a strike partner next to him. I don't like him leading the line by himself. I don't think he's that good at it because I don't think he's particularly fast. He's got good strength and he's got good link-up play, but who's he linking up with? He needs a striker next to him who can run onto his passes and be a clinical finisher. I think he's got good shooting technique, but I don't think he's a very clinical finisher in front of goal. But I do think he gets good power on his shots and he gets good gets fairly good accuracy. But he's not he's not very good at bending his finishes and the finesse part of the game. So I like Che Adams and I do think he's quite a decent link-up striker. But him up front in his zone, I think he's much better when he's got a partner with him, close to him.
Bring up the predicted lineup for Southampton. This is the same lineup that they played in the last game, but obviously Kyle Walker-Peters went off injured that game, so we've replaced him with Bree. So it's Bella Kutchup, Bednarek, Porro and Bree as a back four. I mean, a very young back four, that is, apart from Bednarek. Diallo,
back five, very young.
Diallo, Ward-Prowse at the back, Alcaraz, Suleimana and Elianusi supporting Che Adams.
He's actually preferred Walcott recently, to be fair. Walcott started the last few games, but he's been terrible.
I don't think he started the last game, did he, against Brentford? I think they dropped him for that game because he had a poor game in the previous game. But
I only watched the second half and he was on, so he must have come off the bench or something.
Right. But look, I think that this is a team that we should be taking 3 points in. And when you're looking at how Spurs set up in this game, are you looking at an unchanged lineup again from last week?
Last week was against... who did we play last week? Forest.
Yeah.
Forest at home. Was Davis left with... Yeah, I would go unchanged. I don't think there's any reason to change it. I think we were dominant for that first half. And although the second half Forest game was a bit more trouble, I think the game was pretty much done by then anyway. I think Porro deserves us to keep his place. I wouldn't see any reason to change him. I think Richarlison, same token. I thought he had a really good performance. I think it sends out the wrong message if he comes out the team. Son and Kane, are clinical. I think Davis should be keeping his place at left wing back right now because he just gives us a bit of solidity there ahead of Perisic. I think I would. I don't see a reason to change it. I really don't. I think I would keep it unchanged. I think that team has pretty good balance, and I think with Skip and Højbjerg in the middle as well, there's good. I think there's players you can trust to be up there, up for the fight against Southampton centre midfield and dominating that area, and make sure that Ward-Prowse isn't dictating things as well, and making sure that they're kind of all over him. So I agree. I think I would go unchanged. I don't see a reason to change it.
Is this the problem kind of Emerson has? Because obviously he's in really good form at the moment, Emerson. But Porro's come in and he's just shown another dimension to his game that Emerson just doesn't have. So, I mean, what are you feeling about Emerson and his future at the club now in terms of when now Porro's in here and he's kind of settling in?
I don't see big questions about his future. I just think we need competition for places. Porro came in and Emerson was in great form, so we kept playing Emerson. That's fair enough. Emerson got injured, Porro's come in, and now Porro is the one in great form, so why take him out? And I think what was actually quite telling for me was how quickly Conte decided to move to Porro in that AC Milan game. Like within 5 minutes of the second half, he was like, okay, I'm getting Porro on. That kind of told me that despite how well Emerson is playing, I think he sees Porro as the guy who can really do what he wants on that right wing back as ahead of someone like Emerson. Because the fact that Emerson, when we play him, he has to play that role where he's cutting inside and not getting out wide and not being in those positions he naturally wants his fullback to be. And the fact that when Porro came on, he put Porro straight away out wide, and he tucked Kulusevski in straight away. That tells me that's what Conte really wants. That's what Conte really wants to do. So,
and it makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah. So if Porro's going to be the one doing it, then he's going to have the shirt right now. And obviously, if Porro has bad performances, Emerson can get his way back in the team. But as long as Porro's doing what Conte needs from his wing back, then I don't see any reason why Porro shouldn't be the number one choice right now.
I just asked one thing of Harry Kane this weekend, man. Just let Porro take the free kicks. Please. Just let Porro take the free kicks. I mean, it pissed me off so much at Wolves when Porro hit that bar for that free kick and then Harry Kane didn't let him take that next one. It pissed me off so much. But look, it's going to be an interesting game. Me and Sim will be down at St Mary's tomorrow. What's your score prediction going into it?
I'm going to back us to win. I am a bit worried, actually, in this game because I feel like we're going to go into this game thinking that's how it's Southampton, they're bottom of the league, we're going for top four.
Keep doing this.
But I'm worried about it because we're going to really see the mentality of this team right now in terms of how we're going to approach this top four battle. Because it's going to be a battle. We're going to have to fight for every point right now. It's not going to be easy. We can't look at last season and think, oh, because we won 10 of the last 14 games last season, it's going to be as simple to do it this season. Because last season, we really stepped up to the plate and we really stepped up to the challenge, and we were really up for the battle, and we were fully behind Conte and the project. This season, it just seems to be a bit different. That's what I'm worried about. So if we're not as up for it as we were last season, we're going to be dropping silly points, and I'm worried that we'll go into this game and we have the ability to drop silly points if we're not completely up for it. But I'm going to go for Spurs to win. I'm going to hope that Conte still has the players 100% on side, and they're going to be 100% up for the battle, and if the mentality is there, we'll win the game. But I'm just worried that it won't be. But I'm going to go for 2-1 Spurs.
2-1. I think it will be fairly tight, to be honest. I think Southampton are going to try and play some football on the day, but I think we're going to be a bit too strong for them. Hopefully we'll have that defensive solidity.
We got to remember, we're off the back of 4 losses away from home in a row.
I know. That's the problem. But I'm hoping that quality can shine through in the game this weekend, and I'm going to go for 1-0 to Spurs. I think it will be tight. But that is our match preview.